Welcome, and this is part 2, I should note, of my conversation with my buddy Stu. If you want to see part 1 of all this, of Stu and I riffing, trying to save the country, you need to go to Stu's YouTube channel, youtube.com/StuDoesAmerica. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel, same way you've done here. Like, subscribe it. This is probably going to be a thing we do because I enjoy talking to Stu, so we're going to go back and forth. Part 2's here, part 1's over there. Okay, Stu, so I was thinking about this earlier this morning. I was just kind of pondering things. You know what a deep thinker I am, Stu. No, I was pondering where we are as a country. And I do have hope. I mean, people think sometimes I can get too cynical, and I admit I am a bit cynical about some things, but I do have hope that there are at least large portions of this country who share our values, millions of people who share our values. We just don't see and hear from them enough, so we feel like we're more surrounded than we are. Is that me being rose-colored glasses, Jesse, or do you agree with that?
I definitely used to agree with it. That's been my operating system since birth, I think, for the most part. I've always sort of believed that at the end of the day, the average person would rise up and say, okay, enough of this nonsense, at least here. I mean, you look around the world, it doesn't happen all that often. This is not the norm. You know, America in world history is not the norm. That is not, freedom is not the default setting for humanity. And, it's interesting as I've gone forward, I've become a bit more pessimistic on that question, because it does feel like a lot of our beliefs aren't based on principles. They're not based on anything other than, I don't know if it's vibes or what. It seems like we've lost that connection. We went through I kind of came up, with the Glenn Beck program during the Tea Party era. That was, when the show really started growing and Glenn grew into national prominence, and the show really grew. And what I loved about that era, it was really based on principles. It was based on something that was beyond politics. It was something that it was more of an operating system. Like, we knew we wanted a small government. We knew we wanted constitutional principles. We knew we wanted those things. And whatever was going on during the day was sort of a question that could be answered by those principles, right? That's when you need them. When things get difficult, that's when you need those principles and more eternal answers. And I feel like lately we've gone off the track more and more on that. And part of this might be because I've been on vacation and just kind of taking in the news from a distance for the past couple of weeks. And when I do that, first of all, I put on a lot of weight, but also secondly, I lose contact with the American people. And one of the things I think I love about radio, and YouTube is the same way, is you're able to connect with actual real people. It's not, you're not dealing with morons that are on The View, right? You're dealing with actual people living actual lives. And that's when I'm brought back to my hopeful state again. We take callers on the air. We'll do a YouTube live. We're doing YouTube lives throughout the election whenever a big breaking news event goes on, because, just to try to give perspective and help people keep their sanity. And we'll do that, and I'll pop on, and the questions are just great. These are people who are really thinking about the country, who care about their neighbors and their children and what the future of this country looks like, whether they're in it or not. I mean, they're looking generations ahead, and they care so deeply. So I've come to some place of pessimism as to how this winds up over the next few years. But I do feel like, as a person of faith and a person who loves this country and a person who believes in the Constitution, that eventually we'll get there. Eventually we will rediscover the constitutional principles that have brought us to this point. But man, I don't know. And you've talked me into some dark places at times, Jesse, listening to you and watching you on Twitter, when you talk about, for example, the fact that we're going to lose a major war at some point in the future. And I think about that, and it's like, that's always been a given. We're going to kick everybody's ass. This is America. Like, this is what we do. And then I listen to you and I'm like, good God, here's somebody who's been in the middle of this, who's watching this stuff closely and cares about the same things that I care about and sees where we're going. And I do feel like we're in for some darkness here before the light.
No, I agree. And I should probably clarify for anyone watching, although anyone watching my YouTube channel has probably heard me elaborate on this before, that part of a big reason I say that is I'm trying to prevent it. I'm trying to get that way of thinking out there in the ether so people will wake up and realize what the stakes are. You know, I told you I was watching. If you missed part one, again, it's on Stu's channel. Stu and I were just talking about this in part one, youtube.com/StuDoesAmerica. I was listening to a World War II show, of kind of a podcast type thing on the way to work this morning, so I'm kind of nerding out on something. And it was about the Battle of the Philippine Sea. I'm not going to nerd out for everybody. It was us versus Japan. Later in the war, we were beating the living crap out of Japan by this point in time. Anyway, so we are busy slapping around the Japanese Navy, and we go in for some night attack. Our planes come in night attack, and the Japanese, by this point in time, they're just not equipped right. They're not ready. They're not logistically ready. And we start just dropping bombs, dropping aerial torpedoes on these huge ships, battleships, and aircraft carriers and things like that. And they're going over just the ships, what happens there. Okay, there was a huge blowout and guys are dying, and then the ship explodes. And this is going into the night, so it's going into the dark, right? We're in the middle of the ocean. And these ships start going down, and they start reading casualty numbers off these ships. That ship goes down with 600 men on board. That ship goes down with 200 men on board. That ship goes down with 1,200 men on board. Now, these were men who were never seen again. And you can read that in a book or listen to it in a documentary, and maybe even you, because it was the enemy, you don't think about it, but I want everyone to sit and process that. What if that was 1,200 American sailors going down into the inky black darkness of the Pacific War because our military has so rotted with force readiness out there that we weren't able to fight off a hypersonic Chinese missile coming our way? Because those days are not unrealistic. Those days are very, very realistic. Those are the stakes. Remember how torn up everyone in this country was, understandably, when 13 of our warriors were blown up in Afghanistan. I was freaking despondent. I about lost my mind on the radio that, and I don't think I've ever screamed like that. I don't like to scream and yell. I was just freaking mad and sad. That was 1,300 in one day, in 5 minutes. Those are the stakes. When I talk about what's happening with the military, you can't make people care right now, Stu, because it's peacetime. I understand that's a relative term with Ukraine and Israel, and I get all that, but it's peacetime for us, so you can't get Norm and Norma, the normal American, to give a crap that the military is rotting. But when it's time to care, one, that will be too late, and two, it's going to friggin' hurt when that day gets here, and it's going to hurt bad. And knowing that it's going to be a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds who go down into the depths, that's what tears me up. I'm terrified of that day, terrified.
Yeah, it's a real possibility. And I honestly don't even know at this point whether a big event like this does wake people up. I mean, you mentioned Afghanistan. This is the biggest foreign affairs failure of my lifetime. The fact that the administration that was in office when just that occurred, forget inflation, forget the border, forget all the woke nonsense we've gone through, forget everything else for a second, just Afghanistan, just the fact that 2 days ago, the Taliban was doing a parade with a bunch of our military equipment through the streets of Afghanistan. Just that should be enough that the Biden-Harris administration should be at 3% in this country or less. Like, that should be enough. And the fact that it's not is terrifying. Another example of this is the Secret Service. My entire life, I believe this was an incredible, top-notch organization that no matter who the president was, they did everything they could to defend them. And I remember watching the footage of Donald Trump being shot. I can remember the look on my wife's face when she saw it. It's a life-changing moment for an American. You're watching your president almost get assassinated on live television. And a couple of days later, they released some report that said they knew they were aware of the shooter 90 seconds before that shot was taken. And I lost my mind. 90 seconds? I lost my mind. I couldn't believe it. 90 seconds. Now we're at the point where they knew hours before. The guy had drone footage of the event beforehand. No one seemed to do anything about it. They knew, you watch the guy in video after video after video, walking back and forth across the field, standing up across the rooftop in the background of people's iPhone videos, and no one does anything. We are at a situation where these institutions that we've all kind of trusted, from the military to even the Secret Service, have just dwindled and disintegrated to such a level that there's a story out today that, you know, a Secret Service officer had to leave her stand, the place she was supposed to be guarding, to breastfeed her child. Well, look, I love good moms, and if you can pull off a job, it's hard. To me, it's already a job to raise a kid. If you could do another one, wow, that's incredible. But I'm going to draw a line in that maybe the breastfeeding during the service to protect a presidential candidate, maybe that should just be eliminated from our repertoire of events that could be possible. And I don't know that the American people realize how far these things have gone, but there have been a lot of wake-up calls recently, Jesse.
They don't realize, Stu. They don't. And I mean, let's talk about the rot in the institutions in just a moment. But speaking of the American people not realizing it, so I hang out with my neighbors all the time. We have a very close neighborhood, and they're all Republican, and they all know what I do for a living. And when we hang out, throwing horseshoes, hanging out, kids in the pool, whatever it is, they'll bring up politics to me constantly. Hey, we got to do this, got to do that. And maybe the most common thing I get from them. Now, these are relatively successful people, however you want to classify that. They have homes, wives, kids. You know, these are the American dream type thing. And again, Republicans. These are not crazy Democrats. But they'll bring up something like crime in New York City. I'll bring up this one because it just happened to me a little bit ago. Crime in New York City. There was a terrible video. It was awful. And guy said, Jesse, you see that thing in New York City? I said, I know, it's terrible. It breaks my heart. He said, we got to get Trump in there and fix all this. I said, all right, I'm voting for Trump too. How's Trump going to fix New York City? He doesn't, even if he's elected, he doesn't have any jurisdiction there. He would have nothing to do with New York City at all. That would be a New York State or New York City thing. But for him, this is a guy who votes Republican. For him, being involved politically or being knowledgeable politically, it's just, I'm voting for Trump. And that to him, and he thought, like he was bragging, Stu, he thought I was going to be like, yeah, dang right, that'll fix everything. And this has become an infection with our society in that we put all our hopes and dreams and everything onto one person, and we say, well, that's what'll fix it. I'm just going to go vote Trump. Anyway, I think the game's on. That's not political activism. That's not getting involved. That's not doing anything. Voting for Trump this November is not even, doesn't even classify, doesn't even qualify as the bare minimum. That's the basic of being a breathing human being. But because we have lost what it means to be involved, our government has rotted out from under us to the point where now it's a criminal organization that only exists to protect itself. It's just like you just mentioned with the Secret Service. Criminal organizations exist only to protect themselves. You know, how many people will the mafia kill in their own mafia crime family if they think someone's about to go to jail? All of them. The criminal organization only exists to protect the criminal organization. When Christopher Wray was appointed to the FBI by Trump, and everyone was mad at the FBI back then because all the spying they'd done on Trump and the abuses they'd done on Trump, I remember it like it was yesterday. He was interviewed. I forget what the interview was about, but he talked about what his job was. And he said his job was protect the agency, not reform the agency, not find those nefarious agents who were responsible. He viewed his job as protecting the FBI. Secret Service Director, just the other day, Rowe, acting Secret Service Director, I think this was yesterday or the day before. The Secret Service just about got Trump's head blown off. They allowed some 22-year-old nutball, 148 yards in an elevated position, to get on top of Donald Trump and almost blow his head off. We almost watched his brains get splattered all over the stage. That is a failure on a level to where we should have 50% of the Secret Service fired today. that kind of failure. And the Secret Service director had an all-hands-on-deck conference call with the Secret Service. And on this conference call, the entire thing was about how he doesn't like how people are talking about the Secret Service, and we are brothers and sisters, and we need to be together, and we need to look out for each other, because protecting the Secret Service is what really matters. The Secret Service, you think, and I think the Secret Service's job is to protect Donald Trump. The Secret Service thinks the Secret Service's job is to protect the Secret Service. CIA doesn't think their job is to be the eyes and ears of America and protect America. CIA thinks the CIA's job is to protect the CIA, because they're all criminal organizations at this point in time. And they're criminal organizations back to people like my neighbor who I was just talking about. They're all criminal organizations because even right-thinking Americans have completely checked out of civics, checked out of the political process, so you can look at some illegal gang raping a woman in New York City and say, Trump will fix it, because we just don't have any idea how things even work anymore.
Yeah, and we've totally lost faith in those institutions, many of them rightfully so. But let me hit what you're talking about with the Trump thing, because I think it's fascinating, and I feel the same thing from a lot of people that I talk to. First of all, they're incredibly confident that Trump is going to win. And I am, I don't know what's going to happen here. I think it's going to be close, as you mentioned, and I mentioned this to a lot of them when Biden was still in. You think about Biden, who had those 3 or 4 weeks there. We had the debate, all the horrible interviews, the terrible press conferences, everybody in the Democratic Party calling for his ouster, George Clooney writing op-eds. All of that happened. Joe Biden went through that month with a 36% approval rating at the beginning of it, before the debate. So people didn't like him. He goes through that month, and at the end of it, when he drops out, he is trailing by 3% in the national polls. Like, it is stunning to me, and everybody I talk to around, I live in Texas too. I live in a conservative area. Most of the people I talk to are conservatives on a day-to-day basis. It's unlike the days where I used to live in New York and literally no one was a conservative or even a moderate Republican around me. It's different, but they're incredibly confident that, number one, he's going to win, and number two, that's basically all that needs to be done. And look, Trump feeds into this. He's talked about his, I alone can fix this. He does speak that way. I, as a person watching politics over a long period of time, it's one of those things I don't take seriously. What do they say? Don't take it literally. You can take it seriously. He wants to fix these problems, but he's not literally going to be able to solve all of them. But I think it's fascinating to watch that because, I mentioned the Tea Party, and I think that was over on my channel, but that was more of it wasn't hero ball. And I think we, as conservatives, can get lured into this hero ball thing where, I was watching the Olympics the other day, and it's a close game against Serbia, and, LeBron James is dribbling between his legs and throwing up fall-away threes and bricking off the front rim. That's not the type of stuff that's going to save the country. Hero ball doesn't do it. And I think there are some encouraging signs, though. I think organizations like Moms for Liberty, for one, who've really kind of risen up from nothing and created a really massive organization that's making a difference. Corey DeAngelis, the work he's done on school choice in this country has been incredible. Chris Rufo on DEI and CRT. There are people actually making a difference. And Trump, obviously, as president, is a big part of that. If he fails or doesn't do what he's promising or doesn't win, it's going to be much, much, much harder. But it's only a part of it. And if we all sort of kind of like sins and ends in November for one day, and then we'll see you later in 4 years, we're going to continue on the downward slope we're on.
No, you're right. You're right about that. And this is something I've tried to press as often as I possibly can on my show. And by the way, if you want to hear that Tea Party portion, again, the first part of this is part 2. The first part is on Stu's channel, youtube.com/Stu Does America. Go subscribe, watch part 1, enjoy it. So I press people on this all the time, but you hear from the communists over and over and over again, you hear some version of the phrase, do the work. We have to do the work. We were going to do the work. We'll do the work. We'll do the work. I remember that Becky Pringles, NEA president, got made fun of. I'm sure you mocked her relentlessly for that absurd speech she gave a couple weeks ago, and it was all about doing the work. We have to do this work. We're going to do this work. We get to do this work. The communists are in this because it is a religious mission for them, and they intend to do the work. And the work is the non-sexy things. For instance, in Arizona, this made headlines yesterday, day before, that now abortion is going to be on the ballot, whether or not it's going to be constitutional in November. That obviously was done by the communists because American women love abortion. They will vote to destroy all of Western civilization if they're allowed to slaughter their unborn babies. So abortion gets American women to the polls to vote for Democrats. Democrats got it on the ballot, so now Arizona might be in play. Well, that begs the question, how did it get on the ballot? You need 300-some thousand, I think it's 330,000 signatures to get something like that on the ballot in the state of Arizona. The Democrats, the communists, dug in. Normal people, you'll never know their names, you won't see their Instagram channel, you'll never ask for their autograph. Regular, normal street animals, they went out there and collected over 500,000 signatures. The American Republican, the American on the right, they think putting on a MAGA hat and going to a Trump rally and voting once every 4 years equals political involvement. The American communist is at every election, local elections, school board, they're in everything. If you want to know why you have a child drag show in your rural town in Oklahoma, I don't understand how this happens here. It's 94% Republican. It happens there because you drive by the local library and don't ever look to the right. You don't even glance at it. The communist moved to your town, knew he was a minority, and he drove by the local library and said, that's a place where I can go take power and then force my will on people whether or not they want it or not. We can't, look, I brought up my neighborhood, Stu, my neighbors. I am on a freaking group text from hell with my neighbors. It is endless sports, this and NFL and all this other crap. And last time there was a local election here, I sent out a text. It's the only political text I've ever sent to this group. Hey, this is an important local election here. You can go vote today. Get out there, vote for these three people. It's three people on a ticket. And if you send out a Dallas Cowboys meme on this group text thread, you will have 25 responses. Ha, 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 screw you, go Eagles. I sent out one text to drive down to City Hall. Crickets. Not one person so much as gave it a thumbs up. Couldn't possibly care less. I have a bunch of former communists who listen to my show, and one of them was telling me she's a hardcore conservative now. Back when she was a dirty commie, she missed one local election one time. One local election, I forget what it was, some bond election or something most people won't even vote in. She was so racked with guilt. She was so despondent. She had to go see a shrink for months to get over the guilt she felt by missing one local election. Now, if that's their level of commitment, and we just discussed our level of commitment, then this thing only ends one way. The solution is not Trump in November. Yes, we need that. That helps a lot. Yes, let's get Trump in the White House in November. Saving the country is a process, not an event. It's not going to be decided in November. Either normal people will get involved and start taking back their communities, or it doesn't matter, we're finished.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I think, you mentioned how they think about this, how the communists and the left think about this as a religion. And it really is that way. And, it's largely because they've lost their actual religion, right? Like this is what they believe in. I was watching Elizabeth Warren today, and she was on Twitter, and she was commenting about a J.D. Vance interview. And J.D. Vance was saying something like, they care about all this stuff that's not normal. And he mentioned like abortion. And her response to that was like, excuse me? Caring about abortion rights is not normal? Oh, of course it's not normal. Of course a person who is an adult fighting for the rights to take the lives of children is not normal. Of course. You know what would be normal? Fighting for the lives of children to live. That would be normal. But they are so in this world and so obsessed with taking away your rights. And they act like the rights of the woman are the most important thing when it comes to abortion. What about the child's life that ends? What about the child's life that doesn't have a chance to live the rest of their lives, to do anything from creating the next medical innovation or miracle, all the way down to cutting me off in the line at Chili's? Whatever they are going to do, they deserve a chance to do it. whether their life's going to be incredible or whether it's going to suck. And Elizabeth Warren is like, well, actually, we should fight for the rights. They have this passionate, desire for the ability to end children's lives. And like back in the day, it was this pitch of safe, legal, and rare, right? Like that's what it was. It was this necessary evil. Sometimes there's tough circumstances and we have to do these things. And they're not there anymore. And there's this dedication. I don't know. To me, it's bizarre. And it's this strange, passion and lust to be able to end children's lives. I'll never freaking understand it. But the way they care about that is the way we have to care about the country. It's the way we have to care about all the issues we're passionate about the Constitution, about the future of the nation, about our military, about our local school boards, right? Like finally, conservatives have woken up to things like that, where they care about the education of their own kids. It used to be like you just send them off and you'd have this sort of American faith that those schools would do at least a halfway decent job at educating your kid. And for years and years and years, the left was able to kind of have us asleep on those types of issues. I do think we've woken up, at least at some level. At least we're kind of aware and starting to make a difference. I've noticed it in our communities. I've noticed it in some others. But man, if we don't find that passion and that almost religious fervor, and honestly, it's very closely tied to your religion too. So if you want to just activate the religious fervor you have already, I think it works. But if we don't find that on these issues, we'll continue to slide into the abyss.
We will. And I should emphasize what Stu just said. I have seen more local activism from people on the right in just the past few years than I have in all the entirety of the rest of my life combined. Very clearly, people are figuring out, they're getting the message that you have to get involved locally. Your community needs to become a little fiefdom of yours that you seize control of. Run the filthy commies out of power in your community, in your state. And Lord willing, that spreads enough that we save it from D.C. But America won't be saved from D.C. And like you said, they're waking up to this. As far as abortion goes, I've been thinking about this, Stu. And look, it's very clearly demonic. It's not a new thing. Child sacrifice is sadly not a new thing. Horrific, evil societies throughout history have done this practice over and over again. The Phoenicians, I mean, you name it, it's just been done. Why is that done? Why is it? How could it possibly be that so many totally different groups of people in totally different locations would somehow come to the conclusion that we need to take the most innocent, most defenseless among us and slaughter them en masse? Because that's a weird thing for everybody to kind of come up with on their own. And the reason it's not that weird is because it's demonic. It's of the devil, of course. The most innocent, the most precious would be, of course, the number one target of this. And this has been ingrained in American society to the point it absolutely sickens me. And one thing the right should never, ever, 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 ever do is back off of that issue. I won't participate in any backing off of that issue, and anyone who does can screw off.
Oh, I'm glad you say that, because I think, there are, and some of the arguments I kind of understand, right? There's these pragmatic arguments about elections where, like, look, you've seen elections go the wrong way on this issue since Dobbs happened. And there's this sort of sensitivity to back off of it. And maybe we should mention it as much. And it's like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, what are we fighting for? What's the purpose of all of this? Why do we blab about this every day? Why do we fight so hard for these issues? Like, look, I really want lower tax rates, and that's important. It is. I want lower tax rates. It's bigger than that. Economic freedom is massively important, and I care about it quite a bit. But man, if we can't sit here and admit that we want children to live, what the hell is the purpose of this movement? What are we doing on a day-to-day basis? And I find a lot of people who are nervous about that. I get why. I really do. A lot of smart people think, oh, well, we shouldn't be talking about that. It's offensive. And it is important, I think, the way we talk about it in some ways, especially with people who are maybe not aligned with us on these issues and are more. But at the end of the day, how are we the hateful ones on this? We're talking about children being alive.
I'll tell you, and I understand what you just said too, because it's 100% true about people getting nervous electorally. And we have to understand a couple things. people, especially on the right, are desperate. The communists are always desperate, whether they're winning or losing, but the right is starting to feel like we're losing it all. It's coming apart in front of us, and desperate people will make bad decisions, or oftentimes any decision. You know, if you're a young mother with your children in the middle of the ocean in a little boat, and it's doing fine, and the waters are calm, and some group of tattooed out gangsters pull up beside you in a bigger boat and offer to give you a ride, you're going to say no. If the storms are raging and your boat is sinking and that same group of gangsters pull up beside you, you're going to say, yes, my goodness, throw me a rope. You know, desperate people make bad decisions oftentimes, or the only decision they can make. So I get that. And I'm not even pressing as much for Republican politicians to push for this, although I like when they do. It's much more of a spiritual, cultural battle that will take years and years and years to win. It's very obvious since Roe v. Wade, not the overturning of it, since Roe v. Wade, it was 50 years of the culture being abortion's great, abortion's fine, abortion's great, and that got ingrained in the American people, certainly American women, and so it's going to take decades to get that out of them. It's going to take a long time, and there's a million different ways to fight the battle, but we cannot back off of the battle. You're never going to convince me of that, never.
No, and I totally agree, and it really is a long-term battle. It's not just law changes, right? That's part of it. It's an important part of it. We got to fight for that stuff, but it's about convincing people. I mean, like if tomorrow the Supreme Court came out with a ruling and said, actually, you know what, slavery is illegal. It's legal now. We actually blew something a long time ago, and it's legal. You would not see massive parts of the country enslaving black people to work on farms like that, because it is a despised practice. And that's what needs to happen with abortion over a long period of time. Yes, the laws need to change, but the only thing that really fixes it is what people persuaded over, I think it's generations of work. This is a lot of evil. We're talking tens of millions of children who, you know, people that should be here and are not. And that's going to take a long time, Jesse, but it's worth fighting for.
100%. Yeah, no, we need to get to a place where we shouldn't have to ban certain things. That shouldn't be, you shouldn't need a law to stop people from chopping off a child's penis, right? That should just be something we don't do. Anyway, we are out of time. Again, I want to make sure everyone knows Stu, part one of this conversation is on Stu's channel. So go subscribe it, go watch part one over there, youtube.com/StuDoesAmerica. It's not going to be the last time we do this. Stu, my friend, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you.
Jesse, man, thank you.